Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Don't Let the Grinch Steal Your Emails, Get Them Delivered This Holiday Season. I am Jill Bastian. I'm the Training and Education Manager here at Vertical Response. And today for the webinar, we have Kirsty Esparza. She's here from our delivery team. And she's going to go through some great tips to help you get your emails delivered this season, or any season. Just a couple of things before we get started with the webinar. At the end, we will do a Q&A. So if you think of questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the window that you see, or the box that you see on your GoToWebinar window, and you'll be able to, or we'll be able to answer the questions at the end. The other thing is that one of the most popular questions that we get every time we do a webinar is this being recorded? And the answer is yes. So after the webinar is over, we'll send out some follow-up emails, and we will include a link to the recorded version for you. So just in case you miss something along the way, you'll be able to go back and take a look at it later. So with that, we're going to get started.
All right. Thank you, Jill. Today's agenda covers, we're going to cover some of the basics that we get a lot of questions about, and we'll talk about canned spam and how it applies to your list management. We'll take a look behind the scenes and how we handle email and how it's accepted by the ISPs and what we do to keep our network reputation as strong as possible to ensure that you're getting the best inbox placement that you need. We'll talk about a few new changes that are on the landscape, specifically Gmail Priority Inbox and Hotmail Sweep. And then we'll review a delivery checklist and get to your Q&A answers. And in fact, we have a few questions and answers scattered through the presentation that we've gotten previous to this presentation, so hopefully we can answer some of your questions along the way. All right, so moving on, let's talk about canned spam facts. And basically what canned spam outlaws is the use of false or misleading headers, and that's the embedded information that we handle on our end internally. You can be sure that we are compliant with canned spam laws and keeping you compliant as well. Canned spam outlaws the use of deceptive subject lines, and so what that means is you can't say, hey, you've won the Microsoft lottery. I'm sure some of you have received spam like that. And then inside is a promotion for something else. You can't basically tease with something that's not relevant to the content inside of the email. The next requirement is a clear and conspicuous opt-out mechanism within every commercial email. And so we do that, and that's our opt-out link at the bottom of the email. We embed that into every email we send from our system. So we definitely take care of that for you as well. And we also provide an opt-out process through a reply. So if a recipient received the email, they could opt out in a couple ways. One is through the opt-out link, and the other is by replying to the email with, simple unsubscribe request. And then the final requirement is a valid physical postal address within every commercial email. And some of you may have had campaigns kicked back to you from our support department asking for you to insert the address. And this is an issue that happens a lot of times when you're first using VR, and it's just one of the steps you've mixed along the way. So that's why our support department is so stringent with that rule. It is a legal requirement. And so getting to the question that usually comes up around canned spam specifically is, with the Canned Spam Act, do you really need to obtain permission from the recipient in order to send emails? And then does it have to be double opt-in? And the answer is no. It is a slippery slope, as the slide says, but according to the Canned Spam Act, you don't have to have explicit permission in order to mail to anyone within the U.S. Within VR, though, within our terms of service, you do. So even though you may be legally compliant mailing to somebody who has not subscribed to your list, within VR's terms of service, we do require that the recipient has given specific permission to receive mail from you. And while it doesn't necessarily have to be a double opt-in request, that is the safest and the recommended best practice.
And our opt-in form is double opt-in.
That's right.
But if your current list that you're using isn't double opt-in, as long as they have opted in some way, then you're allowed to mail that through Vertical Response. You just can't use purchased or harvested or rented lists in our system.
That's right, that's right. And so, as a little stocking stuffer in this presentation, one thing we recommend is that go ahead and include an opt-in link in your email messages, especially if you're sharing your email content in your social networks, because there could be people in your social networks uh, who are your friends who may not be opted into your email marketing. So that gives them an opportunity to engage with you at that level. And then also encourage your subscribers to forward the messages on to their friends or their social networks. And so then by including the opt-in link in your email, you're giving your friends' friends and social networks the opportunity to join your mailing list as well.
We have a great tool in our system called the social share feature. Once you've sent your email out, you have the ability to share that email with people on Twitter or Facebook. So that's one way to reach people who haven't maybe opted into your mailing list yet, but are following you on Facebook or follow you on Twitter. In addition, it also allows you to find people who aren't currently following you. So if they do a search on either of those social media platforms for the type of business or services that you offer, your information is going to come up and they'll be able to see what you've been tweeting or what you've been posting on Facebook, including the emails that you've been sending out. So that makes it really easy to reach a wider audience of people without actually having them on your specific email mailing list. And adding an opt-in link to your email makes it easy for, especially if you're tweeting your email, makes it really easy for people who are taking a look at it on Twitter to be added to your mailing list. Because you can't, with Twitter, you can't actually have an opt-in form there, but you can have a link in your email where they can sign up.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look. Vertical Response has a pretty strict anti-spam policy. Part of that is our opt-in requirement, which we require every recipient of your email to have specifically opted in. We just went over that. And we have an automated bounce and unsubscribe process in place. So that means that anyone who unsubscribes generally is caught. I'd say about 99% of our unsubscribe requests are caught by our automated system. The rest may be forwarded to your reply to address, which is why we encourage you to monitor the replies coming through, so that if an unsubscribe request has come through the reply to address and has not been caught by our systems, you're catching that on your end as well. We do have bounce processing in place, and we do get a lot of questions about this, so I'll step aside and talk about that just a little bit right now. Um, a bounce occurs when an email cannot be delivered, basically. There are two types of bounces. There are permanent bounces and temporary bounces. So a permanent bounce occurs when an email address doesn't exist. Either the domain is invalid or has gone dead, meaning it no longer exists or accepts mail, or the email recipient has gotten a new job and they're no longer at that specific email address. So those our system considers permanent bounces, and those are bounced within your data list after the first bounce. We do also process what we call soft bounces. Those are temporary bounces. We process those a little differently. And when we've determined that a bounce, when either we are being told by the uh, receiving email network that there's a temporary delivery situation, or when we've interpreted the delivery situation to be temporary, like if there's a temporary block for some reason, or if there's a technical issue on the receiving side, those are all temporary, and so we do not invalidate the addresses if they happen to encounter that type of bounce. So those addresses will remain mailable moving forward. Then we also have a dedicated delivery team that's monitoring bounces and alerts real time. So if we see anything unusual or anything change, we have a team that's automatically looking at it. They're also monitoring the accounts in the system. So if somebody logs in and they get a VR account and they send to a list that may not be up to our standards, our team is out there watching for accounts that have high bounces or complaints, and we'll remove them from our system if the issue is egregious enough in order to keep our email network as clean and safe for your inbox placement as possible. So the question that comes up, and this relates back to can, spam, and list, and I didn't want it to seem redundant, but I did want to bring it up because we get different varieties of this type of question. So this one is direct. Why can't I purchase a list? I'm can, spam compliant, and as we talked about, yes, technically you can be can, spam compliant and purchase a mailing list. But Again, that's against our terms of service. And why we do that is because in our experience, it's shown that though purchase lists are incredibly unsafe to mail, they can be full of spam traps and old addresses. Basically, the ISPs want you to be mailing people who want to hear from you, and if those people have not given permission to hear from you, then they likely will complain to the ISP. So they're watching complaint rates as well, and purchase lists generate very high complaint rates. Another issue is list attrition, or people whose addresses go invalid and will bounce. About 25 to 30% of a list will expire over time, and the addresses will become invalid annually due to people changing jobs or changing email addresses or unsubscribing. And so if you purchase a list, there's no way to tell the age of that list, so it could be a complete waste of your investment. If you purchase a list that's several years old and half or more of the list will bounce due to invalid addresses. So our experience shows it's unsafe because purchase lists generate complaints, and they're a poor marketing investment on your end because most of the addresses will be invalid or unengaged recipients.
And another thing to keep in mind with the purchase list, besides the fact that the addresses are usually not really great addresses, is that your recipients that you're mailing to on a purchase list don't really know who you are,
Right.
and they receive an email from you and they know they didn't sign up. So they're going to be considering the email that you've sent to them spam, and that isn't a really good way to start the relationship with somebody that you want to be your customer, is sending them spam. It's not a great way to get started. It kind of leaves a bad taste in their mouth, and they may not want to have anything to do with your business or your the services that you offer, your products. So on the flip side, it's also not a great way to start a relationship. So it's better, although it takes a little bit longer, to grow your mailing list organically than just using a purchase list.
You know what? Actually, a great way that you can use a purchase list within our system is by sending a hard copy mailing.
Or
So
postcards.
your postcard. So you can send a postcard through our system, inviting your subscribers to your website or to your opt-in page. Perhaps it's your Facebook page. So you can use that process in order to bring a purchase list into your email marketing program. But it can't be through direct email marketing. It would have to be through a postcard or
Right.
some other mechanism.
Yeah.
All right, so next a little bit of behind the scenes. We get a lot of questions about authentication, and I can assure you that Vertical Response is handling every level of authentication that's required. We authenticate with sender ID and SPF. These all of these roll back to DNS records, so bear with me if some of this gets a little technical, but this all happens behind the scenes in our infrastructure. We also sign our messages with domain keys and DKIM. And essentially, all of these authentication mechanisms roll back up to ensuring that the from address has the right to mail from the IPs or the physical hardware that we're mailing from. So just that we have the right to mail from the from address, and we are who we say we are. And a lot of ISPs and email networks use this authentication to block people who are phishing. So say a person can't say they're Bill Gates when they're not. Some of these mechanisms will be in place to prevent that. And so that's why when the question comes up, I notice that there's mail.vresp.com attached to the from line. What does this mean? And this is the from domain that we send nearly all of our mail from. And we do that to ensure that we are in compliance with the most common authentication protocols out there, the four I described above. And then again, to prevent the appearance of email spoofing. This way, the email networks that we're delivering to know who we are, Vertical Responses. They know that we have customers who send good mail and who can be trusted. And so we have a good sending reputation with our domain as well. And so these ISPs are attaching a reputation to the domain as well as referring to the authentication to make sure everything's in place. So this is all part of the, you know, background magic. It's not really magic, but everything that happens
It
on the
looks a
back
little
end,
magical.
yeah, to make sure we are sending the mail the way the ISPs want to receive it. And when senders don't have these protocols in place, that's a red flag to the ISPs that there could be a problem. So by having these in place, we're just proving that basically we know what we're doing and that we're professionals. So I referred to reputation, and so reputation in email marketing is everything. And reputation resolves back to the sending domain that I just talked about, mail.vresp.com, and it also refers back to the IPs. And I mentioned those earlier, and IP addresses are basically the digital address of where the email is coming from, the hardware, the mailboxes. And so we have several internal tools and systems in place to monitor the sending health of our email network. So the reputation of our IP addresses, the reputation of our domains. We partner with ReturnPath, the world's largest email delivery service provider. And so with them, we use seed listing. So we have some randomly chosen mailings through our system that are seeded and delivered to a third-party seed list so that we can monitor inbox placement and bulk boxing if there are any broad network problems that might be causing delivery issues at a specific domain. We're monitoring all of this real time. We also have alerts set up if we start receiving a bounce that might indicate a delivery issue for a specific sender or on a broad scale. And we're really monitoring the broad health of our network all the time. Um, and so we have all of this in place, again, just to make sure that we are catching any bad players that may have made it onto our system that might impact the overall delivery success of all of our users. And so one of the questions that comes up a lot, and it ties back to reputation, which is why I included it on the slide, is I have a list I obtained from a trade show last year. Can I mail to the recipients? And one of the things that can hurt a sending reputation is old data. And I referred to this with purchase lists, and so this thread will come up again and again. From our experience, unused lists or aged lists really do not perform well. Really, anything more than 6 months old, I recommend not mailing to. Now, if you do find a large list more than 6 months old, definitely, it doesn't mean you can't mail to it. But generally, I recommend contacting our support department, and we can work on a plan to integrate that data into your existing data. And I would recommend a re-opt-in campaign just as a reminder to your recipients, where they signed it up and signed up and all that good stuff. So if you do find a list and you're either unsure of the age or it's a year old or more, reach out to our support department, ask for an escalation to the delivery team, and we'd be happy to set up a mailing program or just discuss the specifics. Um, so
And that means you haven't been mailing to them in a
Right,
year. I mean,
right.
if you have been growing your mailing list and you've been mailing to them on a regular basis, it's okay if your list is, if the people on the list is older than 6 months,
Oh yeah.
as long as they've been receiving emails from you and they're not going to say, I don't know who this is. It's just if you haven't been mailing. And another thing to keep in mind with trade show lists is you do need to make sure, just like any other mailing list, that these people have opted in to receive emails from your company. So you cannot mail to a trade show list prior to the trade show because the people have not signed up with your company. It's pretty rare that a trade show sign up would have you subscribing specifically to emails from each of the companies. Generally, it's just a checkbox. Would you like to hear from the companies here? That's a third-party list. We don't allow that in our system. But once the people have attended the trade show, if they've dropped their business card in your fishbowl to receive emails, or they let you scan their tag to receive emails, as long as they've signed up in some way, then you can mail to the trade show list and then fall into the same things that Kirsty was just talking about.
That's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. And one thing I've also recommended is if you're at your trade show, have your web page up on your laptop and ask people to sign up right there at your booth.
Yeah.
That way they're engaged, they'll remember the interaction,
Mm-hmm.
and then mail to them immediately.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Don't sit on the data. When people sign up for you, immediately send them a welcome email, engage them. Email marketing is about building relationships. And so by engaging with them immediately, you'll be reminding them of their subscription, that you'll be reconfirming their engagement, and you're just starting out on the right foot with that reputation, and your brand will be positively embedded in their memory.
Yes.
All right, so our next little stocking stuffer is when you're doing your email marketing, think about email marketing again as a relationship building mechanism. It's not always sales driven. It should be a time. This should be a time when we're all sort of stepping back in reflection to go ahead and again send a personal note of thanks, send some sort of bonus to your subscribers that's not driving them necessarily to purchase from you. just remind them of their value outside of their pocketbook just for the moment. And as the slide says, this is a great way to re-engage dormant list members right now before you start sending out those holiday promotions. Send out a thank you. Just we think
Mhm.
you're great. Segment your responders and your non-responders a little differently at this point. If you have a really engaged part of your list, maybe message them differently. Maybe do drive them to a more sales focused offer. A thank you with another offer. Maybe just thank your more dormant, less engaged members in order to give them the warm fuzzies and bring them back into that engaged and spending. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? We're trying to generate revenue here, so bring them back into that more active part of the list. So again, we'll step back behind the scenes and look at what we're doing to keep the network as healthy as possible for you. So many ISPs out there offer what are called feedback loops, and this is their mechanism for their users to report spam. So you're familiar with your email inbox. You'll see a junk or a spam button. At the ISPs that offer feedback loops, like Yahoo, Hotmail, Comcast, Roadrunner, there's um, several out there that do. When a recipient pushes the junk or spam button, we receive a notice back alerting us to that complaint so that we can remove or we list these unsubscribe or list these complainers as unsubscribes in your database so that you'll no longer mail them. And this keeps your list clean of people who will complain and impact your sending reputation, as well as it keeps our network clean and healthy from a sending perspective. Those complainers will, if we generate too many complaints over time, they'll impact our ability to deliver mail to the inbox. And so we definitely want to keep those guys, the unsubscribe process for those guys moving. Um, this does come up every once in a while. What if there's an unsubscribe button too? I see this at Hotmail. This also can be seen at Gmail if you open up the envelope information, where the email is from and who it's to. There's also an unsubscribe button embedded there now too. That's a little bit new. This doesn't these If this button is activated, that doesn't count as a complaint. What's happening is the vertical response inserts a header, or it's part of the unseen message behind the graphics that you see when you receive an email message. We insert a header that directs to the list unsubscribe link. So if somebody clicks the unsubscribe button, they're unsubscribed. It's not counted as a complaint, so it doesn't hurt our sending reputation over time. And so this is one of the reasons Hotmail did that, is they found that people were complaining about mail as a lazy way to unsubscribe, and also because people tend not to trust spam. So if they perceive the message to be spam, whether or not they subscribed or not, they will complain about it rather than unsubscribe. So this is both Hotmail and Gmail's way to try to minimize that kind of traffic to give them a better idea of who the good senders are versus the bad senders, and to fine tune their filtering as well. And then there are some new changes on the landscape, specifically with Gmail and Hotmail, and even Yahoo to some degree. They introduced their sort of priority inbox competition a little while ago. And what it all really comes down to is engagement. It is the new buzzword. But what they're looking for, what all of the top ISPs are looking for in order to get preferential inbox placement, is an engaged and active list. They want to see your recipients opening your messages. They want to see your recipients responding to your messages, moving them into special folders. Um, you know, they want people to be engaged with you, exactly the same as you want your recipients to be engaged with you. Gmail in particular is looking at things like how frequently you open and or respond to messages from a given sender, how often you read messages that contain a keyword, and whether or not that message is addressed solely to you or looks like it was sent to a mailing list. In Gmail, if you come across a message that's been marked as important when it shouldn't have been, you can hit an arrow to tell Gmail it's messed up, and likewise, vice versa. You can promote something if it's been sent to the everything else area. So really what I encourage you with these changes in the email landscape is to be engaged with who you're sending email to. If you have a large Gmail portion of your database, maybe you want to segment that portion of your database out and include a little bit different messaging, asking people to, you know, add you to their priority inbox or, you know, star you as important. Anything that may specifically trigger an action for the people within that domain. Same as with Hotmail, you may want to do a special add me to your address book campaign for your Hotmail recipients, just to make sure that they're getting your email in the inbox. One other trick, sort of little known fact about Gmail, is that if a recipient responds to your email 3 times, you will be automatically added to their address book, and this is sort of a quiet way to whitelist. So you'll be automatically added to their address book, and generally your images will render at that point moving forward. So you may want to do a specially designed campaign to your Gmail recipients where you encourage them to respond to your emails. You know, think creatively and out of the box is how you can keep your audience engaged. And that's really, you know, as these email landscapes change, as Gmail and Hotmail and Yahoo and Comcast all introduce new and spectacular features, what it really comes down to is, do the people you're sending email to want to hear from you, and are they engaged with your campaigns? So the question, a little bit switching gears, is I've heard that links and URLs have a reputation, and that by placing them in email campaigns, they can cause the message to go to a spam folder. Yes, this is true, and this is something that we troubleshoot fairly regularly. We'll have senders who either incorporate a new advertising partner, or they've suddenly been acquired by somebody else, and they'll have new links within their email, and suddenly their engagement rates completely change. They go from a 40% open rate, which is astronomical, down to a 2% open rate, and they want to know what's going on. Well, the first thing I look at when a customer engages us for a change in their engagement rates is, what's changed in your email marketing program? Have you incorporated new data? Have you changed your content? If you've experienced a change in response, then there may have been a change in what you're doing that can be pointed back to. So this is what often happens: is we'll see new links causing delivery problems, and so we do recommend that if you're changing your content and you're incorporating new links that you're unfamiliar with, check their reputation, and you can do this through some online resources. You can. I'm trying to think where we make those publicly available. In the Vertical Response Marketing Lounge, we do have a deliverability group, and I'll make sure that the links are posted in that group area if you're interested. But also our support team, if you call, they can help you track that information down as well. So our stocking stuffer number 3. Again, you know, this is right before or as holiday email marketing is beginning to heat up. And so, as I mentioned earlier, be sure to ask your recipients to add you to their address book, priority mailing, or approved sender list. One of the best ways that I encourage recipient or email senders to do this is add the request to your pre-header section, and that way it's always there. And what the pre-header section is sometimes when you're receiving email marketing yourself, you may notice right at the top, right above where the content begins, where the graphics begin, there may be a section that says, you know, if you can't see this message, click here to view it in your browser. Or you may have seen other companies do, if you know, want to add to your address book, you know, add this email address to your address book for, you know, preferential delivery. And this is where a lot of companies will also put the main call to action, just in case the images aren't displayed. You can put the sort of the crux of the email right there. You know, 25% off everything on our site. Add us to your address book. Click here now. So you know, things like that. And Jill, do you have any recommendations on how to add information
I
to pre-header?
do.
I thought so.
So the pre-header text is essentially the first line of text in your email. So it just depends where you're setting that up. If you're on the Vertical Response newsletter list, you may have noticed this in the newsletter up at the very top. So normally where you see the link that says click to view this in a browser, that's where we add our pre-header text, and we have information on, as Kirsty said, our call to action. So if there's a particular guide that we want to point you to, if there's some kind of special going on, that will be a link up at the very top. and that's the first thing that you see. And that's also what you see in the subject line area when you're looking at your inbox. If your subject line isn't really long, you also get to see part of the pre-header text, which gives more information to your recipients. This is really easy for you to do. You can just click in there and add the information, or as I said, it's just whatever the first line is from your email. This is a great place to put, as Kirsty said, the priority mailing stuff for Gmail. I've noticed recently that some of the marketing emails that I get from different companies that I like to shop at have segmented their list to specifically target Gmail recipients so that they are getting added to the priority mailing, and that is usually the pre-header text that I see. And it's right at the top just before you start into what your email is. It's pretty easy to do. You might, if you're interested in this, we have a video on our website. We also have information on our blog, blog.verticalresponse.com. And we also have a webinar this afternoon at 1 Pacific time, called Subject Line Savvy, where we talk about the do's and don'ts of subject lines, and we do go into details on the pre-header text there as well. So, and that's also recorded if you can't attend it today, which I would encourage because we also do Q&A then. It's on our website as well. So there's quite a few resources if you're interested in the pre-header text to find out some more about that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So speaking of do's and don'ts, great, that was an unplanned
segue.
That was great. So again, we do definitely ask your recipients to add you to their address book. This is just a best practice, and it will ensure that they're being delivered to the inbox. Also, in a lot of ISPs, and email networks, if you are in their address book, your images will render automatically as well, which encourages replies. One thing I didn't touch on yet, but that I do like to touch on in these kinds of delivery webinars, is that Spam Assassin, which is really a common email filter that's integrated in a number of large email filters that ISPs use and that are used at the desktop level. Spam Assassin will flag the use of dear as a salutation, so dear friend is, don't use that. Dear customer even is, don't use that either. I strongly encourage you not to use the salutation dear. It's unnecessary in email, and for some reason it gets flagged pretty strictly.
It's because of those I like to call Nigerian money laundering schemes.
It's exactly, dear friend, I'm stuck in some country and I need money or something.
Dear friend, so-and-so died and you have inherited $10 million and all you have to do is send me $50,000 and then you'll get it.
You see, we're all familiar with this. So that's and it is a real, it does get trapped in filters, and the VR marketing team, they even changed all of their templates about a year ago when we sort of figured out what was going on. Excuse me. And when I started making this recommendation to our users, we decided to turn around and apply the recommendation internally, right? Another recommendation is do treat your subscribers with respect. And what I mean by this is I always encourage people to fall back on their own email experience when considering their email marketing program. Would you expect to hear from a company in a similar situation? What type of frequency would you like to see from that type of company? Do you really need to send a daily email, or would a weekly email be better? Do you send sort of randomly, maybe quarterly? And if you do that, if you aren't sending in regular intervals, your recipients could forget who you are and then interpret the mail to be spam when they're not. So just I always encourage people to lean on their own email experience and then treat your subscribers with respect. Don't forget to send out what's promised. That's what I just referred to. If you have sent a welcome message and welcoming your subscribers to your list, and they can expect X, Y, and Z content-wise in monthly email newsletters. Be sure to send those monthly newsletters so that your brand remains strong and that relationship continues to be built and strong. Do keep a clean mailing list, and what this means is do abide by our policies and our terms of service, where we require recipients to have opted in to the message. Don't purchase lists. Don't import third-party lists. These will impact your delivery over time. They'll impact your success, and they may impact your ability to stay a VR customer. So don't mail to a list that's old and stale, only because it's can impact, again, your delivery success. It can impact your brand. And if the bounces are too egregious, our delivery abuse department can contact you and launch an investigation. Do target your list to focus on message relevance. We do offer segmentation tools, and I know that we offer some great training on those segmentation tools as well. So if you are a company and you market several different products, you might want to segment your audience to male and female if you have that information. You may target people regionally or by their job description if you have that information. Specifically, one of the things, if all you have is the email address, you can target within our system on whether they're an active responder or whether they're a less active responder, and that's something I referred to earlier. So even if you don't have a bevy of personal information about your subscribers, there's still different ways to um, look at their email response or their specific um, engagement with your company and target them differently because of that. Don't neglect the building of your list. You may have started your email campaign with a strong list and it's working great for you, but there will be list attrition over time. Like I referred to, there's studies have shown in the past there's a 25 to 30% attrition rate over time. So you'll want to continue to build, and we have list building tools available in VR, be it sharing with your social networks or forwarding to your friends. Um, keeping your opt-in form in as many different areas as possible.
Mhm.
And then again, make sure your links are active and have a good reputation. If there's one thing that will get your email blocked faster, it's a broken link. So if you be careful when you test your email, be sure to click on every link, make sure it goes to where you expect it to go to. An inadvertent typo could really hurt your delivery. So that's one thing I always want to point back to too. Make sure those links are active and they have a good reputation. And so here's our delivery checklist, checking it twice to keep with our theme. When I wanted to just sort of stop and talk about each section of the email and how your audience is engaged with it. So the from label, this is the from address. Generally, it's the
Company name.
company name exactly, and this is a place to let your audiences know who you are. And so I discourage you to use personal names here. And what I mean by that is if your audience signed up at your website and you are acmecompany.com and your audience has shopped at acmecompany.com and they're engaged with the company, if they suddenly receive an email from John Smith, who may be the CEO of Acme Company, they may not know that John Smith is the CEO, and so they'll see an email in their inbox that from somebody who is unfamiliar, and the chances of them opening and being engaged are diminished. And so definitely think about your branding at this stage. Think about what will be most recognizable and what your audience is most engaged with. The subject line is the reason to open your email, and as Jill just referred to, we have a webinar today to talk about subject lines. It is recorded, and I know we have a number of blog postings and things about subject lines. So I encourage you to fall back on these resources as well, because this is really the trigger that gets your audience to open the email. And again, I always encourage people to fall back on their own email experience. Looking through your inbox, what would you think about that subject line if it was mixed in with a bunch of different messages? Would it look spammy if you included a bunch of punctuation, which I would not recommend because punctuation and subject lines can cause filtering. But think about the audience interpretation, your own experience with your own email inbox, and what might get people's attention and what might turn people off.
The from label and the subject line are really the two most important parts of your email. The content is important to you and to your business, but in order for your recipients to see the important content that you're creating, they have to want to open your email, and that's where the from label and subject line come in. Both of these are also governed by the CAN spam law, so you can't do things really misleading in the from label or subject line. But you also want to make sure it's something that's compelling to your recipient. So it's important to think about what you put in your subject line, and it's important to make sure that your from label is consistent and something that your recipients are going to know, so that they trust that what they're getting when they open the email is the information that they've signed up to get from you. So that's why those two things are so important. It impacts your open rate. So if you want to have more people opening your email, be consistent in your from label. Make sure your subject line is compelling and interesting and even fun, but also related to the information that's in your mailing or in your email campaign.
Exactly. The content. This is why people are coming back for more. And with content, some of the recommendations we make are pretty basic. Image spam is a problem, so we discourage people from using one single image as their content. This also, because image blocking at the tier level is so common at ISPs. If a recipient receives an email and all it is a great big X where an image should be, they're likely not to be engaged with that message. So we definitely keep a good balance. The filters out there and the email networks are looking for a good balance of HTML to text. So if you build the campaign within our system and our campaign editors, for the most part, um, all of our templates have been tested, and so as you build them, as you build your email, be sure to as I said, not one large image, and always include a text version. That's the point I was struggling to get to. And you can have a fabulous HTML version, a graphical version of your email, but I've often run into problems that if there's not a text version to balance out the text to HTML ratio, or just to provide an alternate delivery method to the email network, say if it's going to a mobile device, some email networks really want to see both versions, and they just feel that a trusted sender is going to provide both. So I encourage, in fact, this week I was troubleshooting for a user who was facing delivery problems, and we traced it back to the fact that all they were including in their text version was a link to the content on a web browser, and they really just needed to include a little bit more text. And so our recommendation was, excuse me, use the button in our system to convert your HTML to text. And it's a pretty simple one-step button pushing process, and then go through the text version though, because there's, it is an automatic conversion, and so it does need the human touch to go make sure the formatting looks right and all that good stuff. But I definitely encourage you to take the extra few moments that it takes to go through that step.
And if you're using either the wizard or the canvas tool, by default, our system will automatically set up the text version for you. But some people go in there and take out the text version because they don't think people should see that. But that's where Kirsty is saying that there can be such a problem with delivery if you take that out. So go in, make sure your text version looks good. When you send out your tests, we send a copy of your text version as well, so make sure that looks good. And as Kirsty said, a lot of people who are using handheld devices of some kind to read their mail don't always get the graphical version on their phones. So the text version will give them the ability to still see the information you want them to see.
And you really want to be able to provide an opportunity for everyone on your mailing list to receive your message. So by not including a text version, there's a chance that you could be actively excluding a part of your audience that you unintentionally are excluding. So that's why we make the recommendation. The next step to content, and sort of a sub issue, is images. The images are a great place to engage your audience. We have a huge library of images that you can use within VR, and so go ahead and take advantage. Make your subscribers smile if you want, and engage them in the seasonal marketing as necessary. But it's also a good place to look professional, to step your brand up, so to speak. If you're sending a message that's just text with a few links, it may not be as engaging to the audience. So use we have a great supply of templates. Use our campaign tools to build engaging, visually entertaining messages that will keep your audience coming back for more. And then as we're talking about images, so I'm always looking behind the scenes, looking for what if something goes wrong. And so if your message arrives to the inbox and the messages or the images are suppressed, which by default most email networks do suppress images by default, be sure to include an alt text so that people have an idea of what that image is, especially if your image is at the top of your message, you're using it as a header. Maybe have the alt text be your company name. If you have an image of a coupon or a call to action, be sure the alt text reflects that coupon or call to action. So if you have a great graphic, maybe a seasonal holiday graphic, big sale, 60% off, have the alt text say 60% off, click here, so that just in case the images don't render and the recipient chooses not to for whatever reason, they still can see the calls to action and the great offers that you're providing.
That's a really great point you made about the logos too, because last night I was looking at an email at home and my connection decided to get really slow, and I was waiting for the images to download, and I was sitting there going, "Is that really what this email is about?" Because it was the weirdest thing I had ever seen. But it was just the internal name for their logo, and once the image came up, I was like, "Oh, it's the logo," and I was like, and I'm in email marketing. I mean, I know what I'm looking at
Yeah.
usually, and I was like, I have no idea what this means. But it was coming from somebody that I get emails from, so I figured it was a good email, but the logo at the very top, when the image didn't load, the alt text was something really weird and confusing. So make sure that your alt tags say something that's pertinent to your recipient. So your logo, you could certainly have it as your company name or your company website even. So you could do
That's a
like
great one.
like for example us, we could do verticalresponse.com as our alt tag for our logo so that if it doesn't load for whatever reason, slow internet connection like mine was last night, or they're just not loading the images, they'll still know who's sending the email.
It, always an opportunity for good branding.
That's right.
And then calls to action. Include them in your email. Definitely drive your audience to where you want them to go. Email marketing is about relationship building and sharing information, but it's also about driving your audience to your website for purchases or generating revenue. So don't let your audience be confused. Be direct. Tell them, come to my site for this and click here for that. Definitely don't be shy about calling to action
Mhm.
and being upfront with your calls to action. Put big buttons and
Big
flags.
buttons. Yeah, we found buttons are great for call to actions. You'll probably see that in our emails if you again if you subscribe to our newsletter. Our call to action are usually on a button because people like to push buttons,
Okay. That's good. Good
literally
to
and
know. Yeah,
figuratively, I
yeah.
think.